The first time I discovered I was a bit creative, it came as a surprise. I was at Cambridge, and I got to know a very nice group of people who had a small club room near my digs, as they were part of a society called the Footlights, and they put on little shows on the clubroom stage and performed sketches and monologues and musical items. I didn't join the Footlights because I thought I might want to go into show business. Not at all. I was going to be a lawyer. I joined the club because its members were the nicest bunch of people I met at Cambridge. They were good company. Well, of course, because they were all in one way or another funny. And they were also an interesting mixture of social classes and academic interests. For some reason, maybe because they had a sense of humour, they weren't as stuck-up or show-offs or in any way impressed with themselves like some of the other undergraduates. Now, to become a member of the Footlights, you had to write something, and therefore I came up with a couple of sketches to perform and was accepted as a member. Now, each month, I discovered, they organised what was known as a smoker, short for old-fashioned smoking concert, and this was a show put on in the Footlights club room in which all the members took part. And because everyone had to get up and do something, we all had an interest in creating a nice, friendly atmosphere, so it was the perfect environment if you were performing for the first time. And it was during the course of writing sketches, the first imaginative thing I was ever conscious of doing, that I realized I could be creative. That is to say, if I wrote something down on a piece of paper and performed it later on, I could make people laugh. And the point is, what I was writing was original. I don't mean that I wasn't influenced by lots of other people and comedy programs that I thought were wonderful, especially The Goon Show, but what was going down on the paper was mine. And then I started becoming aware of something else that was interesting and very odd too. If I wrote a sketch by myself in the evening, I'd often get stuck and would sit there at my little desk cudgelling my brains, and eventually I'd give up and go to bed. And in the morning I'd wake up, make myself a cup of coffee, then I'd drift over to the desk and sit at it, and almost immediately the solution to the problem that I'd been wrestling with the previous evening became quite obvious to me. So obvious I couldn't really understand why I hadn't spotted it the night before. But I hadn't. And this is how I began to discover that if I put the work in before going to bed, I often had a little creative thought overnight, which fixed whatever problem it was that I was trying to deal with. It was like a gift, a reward for all my wrestling with the puzzle. And I began to think to myself, that can only be because while I'm asleep, my mind goes on working at the problem so that it can give me the answer in the morning. Now, this realization was very foreign to me. I'd always assumed that thinking was all about furrowing my brow and trying terribly hard. Now, while I was still wondering about this, something else occurred. I sometimes in those days collaborated with Graham Chapman, and we'd written a parody of a Church of England sermon. At that time, Graham and I were both obsessed with all the humour we could derive from the Bible, so much so that when people came into my room and saw an authorized version lying on my desk, they would say, "Oh, you've been writing sketches again." Now, Graham and I thought it was rather a good sketch, this parody of a sermon. It was therefore terribly embarrassing when I found I'd lost it. I knew Gray was going to be cross, so when I'd given up looking for it, I sat down and had to rewrite the whole thing from memory, and it actually turned out to be easier than I'd expected. And then I found the original sketch. And out of curiosity, I checked to see how well I'd recalled it when rewriting. And weirdly, I discovered that the remembered version was actually an improvement on the original that Graham and I had written. Now, this puzzled the hell out of me. Again, I was forced to the conclusion that my mind must have continued to think about the sketch after Graham and I had finished writing it, and that my mind had been improving what we'd written without my making any conscious attempt to do so. So that when I remembered it, it was already better.